Today we're going to look at percents. Specifically, what are percents and how to find equivalent fraction and decimal forms for given percents. So let's get started. We see percents everywhere, from sales signs to news headlines and also the market. Now these three examples all deal with money, but percents are everywhere. From grades, I got an 85% on my exam, to shooting percentages in basketball. Nick's field goal percentage is 42.3% for the season. So let's take a closer look at percents. A percent is a ratio of some number to 100. And when we talk about percent, we often use this percent sign. So if we see 27%, that means we have 27 for each 100. So 27 to 100. Again, it's a ratio of some number to 100. So the key here, that second number in our ratio is always 100 when we're talking about percent. And it's even in the name. Percent, well, from the Latin, this is percentum, which means for every 100 or for each 100. So here we have our Roman citizen, and he is thinking about all the other words that we use that are derived from centum, from 100. We have century, which is 100 years, and centennial, which is 100th anniversary. Cent, which is 1/100th of a dollar, and centimeter, which is 1/100th of a meter. Now that we know what percents are, let's work on converting something in percent form into an equivalent fraction form. Here we have 27%. Again, this means 27 for every 100. So in ratio form, this would be 27 to 100. But we can also write ratios as fractions. And as a fraction, this is 27 over 100. So 27 hundredths. Looking at the percent 11.8, we're going to take that number, so 11.8, and we'll put that over 100. Now mathematically this is okay. We have a decimal within a fraction, but that's kind of bad form. So let's get rid of this decimal. And we have one decimal place. This is in the tenths place. So in order to get rid of a decimal that's in the tenths place, we multiply it by 10. Multiplying this by 10, that's going to move the decimal place one place to the right, giving us 118. But we can't simply multiply by 10 and keep everything the same. However, we can multiply by 1 in disguise. So 10 over 10, if we simplify that down, this is equal to 1. But it allows us to get rid of this decimal place in the numerator, but then we also need to multiply the denominator by 10 as well. And 100 times 10 is 1,000. So we have 118 over 1,000. And so for this third problem, we have 0.55%, or 55 hundredths percent. So again, we'll take that number, 55 hundredths, 0.55, we're going to put that over 100. Once again, we have a decimal point, a decimal within our fraction. So let's multiply by some multiple of 10 to get rid of that decimal place. We want to move it 2 places to the right. So we can do this by multiplying by 100. Again, we have to multiply by 1. So we'll multiply it by 100 over 100. This will give us 55 in the numerator and 10,000 in the denominator. So we have now converted something in percent form into fraction form. But now let's go from fraction form to decimal form. And when we have something in fraction form, this is division. So this is 27 divided by 100. So one way to write this in decimal form is to simply divide, to perform long division. So we have 27 divided by 100. So we'll need to add a 0. 100 goes into 270 two times. That's 200. We now have 700. And then 100 goes into 700 7 times. This is 700. And we have a remainder of 0. So using long division, we end up with 0.27, 27 hundredths. But since we're dividing by multiples of 10, it's often easier and quicker to simply move around the decimal point. So we have 27 divided by 100. So 27, and then we have the decimal point at the end. We're dividing by 100. That means we're going to move it 2 decimal places to the left. And that gives us 27 hundredths, or 0.27. The same answer we got with long division. For this second problem, we have 118 over 1,000. So with 118 and our decimal point, dividing by 1,000, we're going to move that decimal point 3 places to the left. And we end up with 0.118, or 118 thousandths. And then finally with 55 over 10,000, so we have our decimal point at the end. Dividing by 10,000, we're going to move it 4 decimal places. 2, 3, 4. That means we're going to need to add some zeros. We end up with 0.0055. So if we're starting with a percent, it's often convenient to first go to fraction form, and then from fraction form to decimal. So we'll go from 27% to the fraction 27 over 100 to the decimal 27 hundredths. Now let's look at going the opposite way, going from decimal to fraction. So here we have the decimal 0.66. So this is 66 hundredths. So this first 6, that is in the 1 over 10, or tenths place. In the second 6, that's in the 1 over 100, or the hundredths place. And as we say this decimal, 66 hundredths, you can hear that hundredths, that's what's going to be in the denominator. That is 66 over 100. Looking at this second problem, we have 0.7. This 7, it's in the 1 over 10 place, or the tenths place. This is 7 tenths. So we write this as 7 over 10. And for this third problem, we have 0.0035. So we have a 0 in the 1 over 10 place. We have a 0 in the 1 over 100th place. We have a 3 in the 1 over 1,000, or thousandths place. And then a 5 in the 1 over 10,000, or 10,000ths place. So this is 35 10,000ths. So as a fraction, we'd write this as 35 all over 10,000. Now if we want to go from fraction to percent, as a reminder, a percent is per 100. So we want some number over 100. So we have that for the first example. We have 66 over 100. So writing this as a percent is 66%. With the second problem, we have 7 over 10. So 7 over 10, our denominator is 10 and not 100. To convert that to 100, well, we can multiply it by 10. Again, we can't really multiply by 10, but we can multiply by 1. So we're going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 10. This gives us 70 over 100. We now have a number per 100. So this is 70%. And then for this last problem, we have 35 over 10,000. So 35 over 10,000. Well, we don't want over 10,000. We want over 100. So to go from 10,000 to 100, we would need to divide by 100 or multiply by 1 over 100. Again, we're going to always multiply by 1. So what we do to the numerator, we do to the denominator. Multiplying the numerator and the denominator by 1 over 100, we end up with 0.35 all over 100. So we now have a per 100 fraction. So our percent is 0.35%. So if we start at a decimal, it's often best to go from decimal to fraction and then from fraction to percent, using that fraction form as an intermediate. So for the first problem, we went from the decimal 66 hundredths to the fraction 66 over 100, and then to the percent 66%. Now let's start at fraction form and then convert to decimal and percent. So we have the fraction 25 over 100. So going from fraction to decimal, I'll go ahead and divide 25 by 100. Again, when we divide by 100, we're going to move that decimal point 2 places to the left. And this will give us the decimal 0.25, or 25 hundredths. And then our fraction is written as a number per 100. So in percent form, we have 25%. For the second problem, we have the fraction 3 over 1. This is division, so we have 3 divided by 1. Go back to your early math facts, and 3 divided by 1 is 3. So in decimal form, this is the number 3. Going back to that fraction, we have 3 over 1. For percent, we do want something over 100. So to convert this denominator from a 1 to 100, we're going to multiply by 100. Again, we're doing it as 1 in disguise, so we're multiplying both the numerator and the denominator by 100. This gives us 300 over 100. So we have 300 for every 100. That means this is 300%. So if our number is greater than 1 in decimal form, and 3 is greater than 1, in percent form, it's going to be over 100%. So when you look at 100%, this is equal to 100 over 100. So this is equal to 1. 100% in decimal form is 1. Now let's look at this last problem. We have 50 over 1,000. Let's first convert this into decimal form by dividing 50 by 1,000. When we divide by 1,000, we move that decimal point 3 places to the left. And add that 0. So we have 0.050, or 5 hundredths. Now let's look at this fraction in percent form. So we have 50 over 1,000. So our denominator is 1,000. What we want is a denominator of 100. So we're going to divide both the numerator and the denominator by 10, or we'll multiply by 1/10. This will give us 5 in the numerator and 100 in the denominator. So we have 5 over 100. That's 5%. If we're given a fraction, we can go directly to both percent and decimal. A great way to learn is to practice on your own. We will discuss in a bit, but go ahead and pause your screen and do these 3 problems. For this first problem, we were given 12.5% and asked to find equivalent fraction and decimal forms. So looking at 12.5%, the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite this percent in fraction form. Again, it's per 100, so this is 12.5 per 100. Well, we have this in fraction form, but it's not a good idea to have a decimal within your fraction. So multiplying both the numerator and the denominator by 10, we get the fraction 125 over 1,000. Now in this lesson, we did not simplify down these fractions, but you can simplify down the fractions if you'd like. It's probably a good idea to. And 125 over 1,000 simplifies down to 1 over 8. So both 1 over 8 and 125 over 1,000 are equivalent fractions for 12.5%. And then again, going back to that fraction form where we have 12.5 over 100, to write it in decimal form, we're going to go ahead and divide 12.5 by 100. This moves the decimal place 2 spaces to the left, giving us 0.125, or 125 thousandths. So as I solved this problem, I went from percent to a fraction, and then from this fraction, I went to decimal. In this second problem, we're given a decimal, and we're asked to find equivalent fraction and percent forms. So we have our decimal, 215 thousandths, giving us our fraction 215 over 1,000. And again, it's a good idea to simplify down this fraction. Both 43 over 200 and 215 over 1,000, these are equivalent fractions to this decimal. And again, going back to our fraction, 215 over 1,000, to go to percent, we want to convert that denominator from 1,000 to 100, and we can do that by dividing by 10 or multiplying by 1/10, giving us the percent 21.5%. So to go from decimal to percent, we again went through that fraction form as an intermediate. And for this third problem, we are given a fraction and asked to find the equivalent decimal and percent form. So we're given 3/5, and I went ahead and took my 3/5 and changed the denominator from a 5 to 100, giving us the fraction 60 over 100. And then to convert this into decimal form, we're going to move that decimal place 2 spaces, giving us 6/10. Now you could have also found this in decimal form by dividing 3 by 5 using long division. And again, you're going to end up with that same decimal. From this fraction 60 over 100, again, we have 60 for every 100. This is 60%. Drop any questions you have in the comments. Continue practicing working with percents, and I'll see you in the next video.